Some stories don't start with a scream. They start with a quiet insult that you swallow for years. A family joke that lands in the same sore spot every Sunday until you stop bringing anything tender to the table. Tonight's story lives right there between loyalty and humiliation, between blood is everything, and the moment you realize blood can still cut. Before we jump in, let's agree on something. We're not here to cheer for anyone's downfall, and we're not here to put labels on people like it's easy. We're here to listen closely, because sometimes the hardest pain isn't being hated. It's being ignored until you become useful. A man spends his whole life wearing the role his family assigned him, the sensitive one, the disappointment, the punchline. Then his golden brother hires a private investigator to prove he's still a failure. Only the report comes back with the opposite, a hidden career, a real life, and a multi-million-dollar success he never bragged about. And suddenly, the people who wouldn't learn his story want to own it. If you've ever felt that switch flip in a room, stay with me. Because what happens next is about power, privacy, and the moment you finally decide you're done paying for love. Before I share everything, I just want to know you're here with me. Drop a simple hi in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far a story like this can travel, and honestly, sometimes knowing someone is listening makes all the difference. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. If you've ever been the one your family underestimated, the one they mocked, the one they only noticed when it benefited them, consider subscribing. It helps more than you think, and it tells me I'm not saying this into a void. My name is Maddox Calloway. Most people call me Mads, and this is the night my brother's investigation finally exposed the truth. About me, and about them. My name is Maddox Calloway. Most people call me Mads, and if you looked at my life from the outside, you wouldn't think there was much to talk about. I'm 31, I live in a modest 2-bedroom home in Providence, Rhode Island, and I drive a 10-year-old car with a cracked taillight I keep forgetting to fix. My furniture's mismatched, most of it secondhand. My neighbors think I'm just another overworked tech guy, which in a way I am. I'm the CTO of a cybersecurity startup, which means I rarely sleep through the night without checking logs or catching some incident that lit up while I was brushing my teeth. I live quiet. I move quiet. And I keep everything about myself locked down tight because I learned the hard way that the people closest to you aren't always the safest ones to hand the keys to. I've had asthma since I was 4. Clinical depression since I was 13. I still go to therapy twice a month like clockwork. And every time I bring that up around my family, I'm met with the same eye rolls, the same comments, you think too much, or you've always been too soft. In the Calloway household, illness, especially the kind you can't see, is weakness. Emotion is overreaction. Sensitivity is something to be mocked. And I've lived under that roof long enough to know how to shrink myself down just to keep the peace. Every Sunday without fail, I drive 4.5 hours north to Marigold Ridge, Vermont to have dinner with my parents. That trip eats up my weekend gas time patience, but I still do it. Part of me doesn't even know why anymore. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's that nagging voice in my head that still sounds like my mother telling me that family isn't optional. It's duty. It's blood. It's a performance. And that's what Sunday night dinners are, not meals, but rituals. My parents want proof that I still belong to them, that I haven't slipped too far away, that I still show up. My dad, Elliot, is a man of few words and firm beliefs. A man should be strong. Pain makes you tougher. That kind of thing. My mom, Maggie, is all appearances. She lives for clean reputations, polished families, and the illusion of normalcy. Then there's Grant, my older brother. He's 40, a sales manager at a car dealership near Burlington. Married to a quiet woman who always looks like she's holding her breath. They have 2 boys, aggressive, athletic, praised constantly. Grant was always the golden one. High school football star, family provider, town favorite. Everything I'm not. My sister Brielle, married young, has 3 kids under 10 and floats somewhere in the middle. She's not cruel, just too afraid to ever stand on the wrong side of anything, which usually means standing with Grant. To the rest of Marigold Ridge, I'm still that weird kid who used to work at the comic and game shop downtown, the one that closed back in 2011. That's the version of me they hold onto, awkward, lost, irrelevant. My family's no different. They haven't asked about my job in years, but they're quick to tell everyone how I'm figuring things out. They don't want to know who I really am now, because that version might challenge the one they've already decided they're better than. Dinner is always the same. Grant holds court bragging about sales his latest truck, the cabin he's renovating, how much his kids are bench pressing. I try to bring up my work just casually, something about endpoint security or a new AI audit tool we're piloting, and Grant steamrolls it loudly, correcting me with wrong information, turning it into a joke. Dad nods. Mom sips her wine like I never spoke, and eventually the comments slide in. Mads is just a little sensitive, or he needs direction, or he still hasn't settled down. I sit there pretending to chew, swallowing not just food but every word I want to scream, because I know how this works. If I try to correct them, I'm arrogant. If I defend myself, I'm combative. And if I told them the truth, that I've built something valuable, something real, they wouldn't be proud. They'd be interested. There's a difference. By the time I pull out of their driveway and head south again, I'm depleted. Not angry, just empty. Numb. The highway stretches like a lifeline and I take the turns on autopilot. But that night, about an hour from Providence, my phone buzzes with an alert. It's from one of my internal monitoring systems, something I set up years ago out of habit more than paranoia. It says there's been an attempt to access my credit report. Someone's trying to get into my financial history. The IP address is local to Vermont. I try to rationalize. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe it's a coincidence. But in my gut, I know better. Someone isn't just poking around. Someone's digging. Someone who knows exactly where I'm vulnerable. And they're not doing it to help me. Back at home, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk in the dark with nothing but the soft blue glow of my monitors and the growing certainty that this wasn't random. I pulled the log's cross-referenced timestamps traced to the access path. The attempt had been subtle masked as a routine employment verification request. But I know that trick. That's not how hackers work. That's how private investigators work. Legal enough to pass a glance, but pointed, specific. Someone wasn't trying to steal from me. They were trying to profile me. I checked every system tied to my identity, financial accounts, bank queries, security flags, two-factor authentications. Everything pointed in the same direction: my records, my status, my net worth, my entire life on paper. And that's when I knew this wasn't some data leak or phishing attempt. This was personal, intentional. Someone was trying to run a background check on me. Someone who didn't want to know me, just audit me. And that's when the memories started rolling in. I remembered what it was like growing up in that house, how my asthma was treated like an inconvenience, how my panic attacks were just bad habits. I remembered skipping college classes because I couldn't breathe and being told I was lazy. I remembered dropping out sophomore year and the way Grant smiled when he said, "Guess not everyone's cut out for it." I remembered how I spent 3 years behind the counter of a comic shop fixing broken PCs and building custom rigs just to afford rent. That's where I met Connor. We bonded over broken code and busted dreams. We built a small IT support company in my apartment. 3 years later, we sold it to a major tech firm for a 7-figure buyout and equity options. I never told my family. Not even once. I didn't tell them about the projects I invested in, the seed funding rounds, the advisor roles. I didn't tell them when I was offered CTO at a stealth cybersecurity startup based in Boston. I didn't tell them when my portfolio crossed 7 figures. I didn't tell them because I wasn't ashamed of the money, I was ashamed of what they might try to do with it. I didn't want to become a meal ticket, or worse, a target. And yet, maybe Grant had started to smell the truth anyway. I thought back to recent comments he'd made, little barbs that hadn't struck me until now, like when he asked if I still had a job or if I'd thought about switching to something more stable. When he offered to get me in at the dealership. When he asked if I had a backup plan in case things fell apart. I'd brushed it off as him being patronizing. But now every word felt calculated. Like he was testing the water. Like he knew something he wasn't supposed to know. A few days later, I got a letter-thin, plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a form from a background verification agency, confirming a request for financial verification. The company name stood out like a siren: North Star Investigations, Burlington, Vermont. Private. Not government. Not corporate HR. Private. I stared at it, heart pounding. This wasn't subtle. This was a direct line. Someone had gone through the motions, used my social security number, and tried to access everything they could get without triggering a full alert. It didn't take a genius to guess who would do that, but I still needed proof. I thought about calling my parents, telling them what I'd found. But they'd defend Grant before I finished my first sentence. I thought about calling Grant directly, asking him why. But that would tip him off. He'd cover his tracks, maybe worse. So I did what I've been trained to do. I logged everything. I built a timeline. I saved every trace, every digital breadcrumb. I wasn't ready to confront him, not yet. But I wasn't going to let this go either. And then it hit me, a small detail buried in a financial query log. A payment method used to request the background check. It matched a debit card ID from a Burlington credit union. A card I remembered Grant flashing at dinner a few months back, bragging about how he opened a new joint account for emergency expenses. That was it. That was the confirmation I needed. Grant had hired a private investigator. My own brother had paid someone to dig through my life to find something he could use. To prove what? That I was still a loser. Still a joke. Or was he just scared I wasn't the failure he'd painted me to be? The sadness came first. Then the betrayal. Then something else resolve. This wasn't just about protecting my data anymore. This was about understanding the full scope of what he was doing, what he wanted, what he thought he'd find. So I made a decision. Step 1, lock everything down. Freeze my credit. Strengthen every authentication protocol. Alert my financial institutions. Step 2, reach out to North Star. Find out exactly what they were hired to do and what they found. Because I knew this wasn't over, and I needed to be ready for what came next. Because next Sunday I'd be sitting at the same dinner table, and I needed to know exactly what kind of game my brother was playing before he made his next move. I called North Star Investigations on a rainy Tuesday morning, sitting in my parked car outside a cafe watching the storm roll over Providence like it was trying to scrub the city clean. The line clicked once, then again, before a clipped professional voice answered. I didn't use anger. I used precision. I said I believed I had been the subject of a background check, and as the individual concerned, I was formally requesting to know the legal basis, the scope, and the data sources involved. They didn't confirm much, just enough. Enough for me to know that yes, a report had been compiled. That yes, it covered professional and financial records. That yes, the request had come from an individual, not an institution. They didn't name Grant, but they didn't need to. The shape of this thing was already too familiar. And here's the part that still makes my stomach tighten. I knew exactly what they found. Because there is no tragic arc in my story for them to cling to. No foreclosure, no substance issues, no criminal background. What they'd see was a man who co-founded a company at 24, exited at 27, invested with unusual success, and now held an executive position at a rapidly scaling cybersecurity firm. They'd find an equity portfolio, a brokerage account, a line of real estate partnerships. The report Grant paid for would paint me as the opposite of everything he wanted to prove. Which meant one thing: when he opened that folder expecting failure, he found proof of something else, something he couldn't control. And knowing Grant, I could already predict what came next. That Sunday, I was going back to dinner not out of guilt, not out of duty, but because I needed to see it with my own eyes. The moment they shifted. The second the condescension turned into curiosity. When the phrases went from, "You still doing that tech thing," to, "Can you explain this investment thing to your dad? I wanted to be there for the turn." But before I even set foot back in that house, something else caught my attention. A line item in the metadata of the report. The level of detail they'd accessed was too deep, too accurate. It wasn't scraped from public records alone. They'd gotten hold of personal identifiers, my social security number, possibly even internal data from a third-party source. That changed everything. This wasn't just Grant being petty. This was a breach, a violation that edged into the legal danger zone, which meant this wasn't just a family issue anymore. It was a threat. And that's when I made a decision that surprised even me. I hired North Star. Same agency, same operators. But now they were working for me. I didn't tell them the personal side of it. I kept it strictly professional. I gave them Grant's full name, his home address in Colchester, Vermont, and authorized a discreet report. I said I was preparing for a financial arbitration, which wasn't a lie. I said I wanted asset verification, credit stability, and any record of outstanding obligations. Again, not a lie. Because I needed to know what had driven him to come for me. Not to humiliate him, not to weaponize it, but to understand what kind of pressure could make the golden child reach that deep into someone else's life just to feel taller. The results didn't take long. At first it was vague, overlapping credit lines, deferred loan payments, and unusually high debt-to-income ratio. Then it got more specific. Grant was carrying multiple debts, some in his name, others co-signed with Maggie, our mother. He'd been refinancing their home almost like clockwork every 3 years. There were flagged notes about IRS payment plans, nothing criminal, not yet. But everything pointed to a man balancing a carefully crafted image atop a very shaky foundation. He was stretched thin, but still posing, still playing king. I spent that night on my living room couch rereading the preliminary findings under the flicker of my desk lamp. There were no smoking guns, just 1,000 little cracks in the statue. Enough to know it wouldn't take much for the whole thing to collapse. And now I was walking into dinner with 2 reports in my head. The first, the version of me Grant had tried to expose, only to find someone successful beyond anything he imagined. The second, the version of Grant nobody in that house was ready to see. And as I got in my car, the question wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about deciding what I'd do if that second report ever had to be opened. I received the full dossier on Grant on a Thursday morning, just as I was walking into a back-to-back sprint of investor meetings. I felt the vibration in my pocket, saw the North Star subject line, and nearly turned around. My fingers itched to open it right there in the elevator, but I knew myself. I knew if I read what was inside, I wouldn't hear a single word anyone said for the rest of the day. So I waited. I waited until after sunset, until the last Zoom window had closed and my laptop screen reflected only my own tired face. I turned off my phone, made a cup of black coffee I wouldn't drink, and sat down at my kitchen table with the document open and my breathing shallow. It started methodically, line items, tax statements, payment, histories. But even in black and white, it painted a story. Grant was drowning. He wasn't just overextended. He was leveraged to the bone. His mortgage had been refinanced twice in 6 years. He carried outstanding auto loans. His credit report showed missed payments, deferments, and a consistent pattern of borrowing to cover other borrowings. The car, the house, the lake cabin, it was all held together with duct tape and ego. Then I saw it. A single line, easy to miss. Record of contact with Vermont CPS. I stopped breathing for a moment. It didn't say why. It didn't list outcomes. But it noted that Child Protective Services had been involved in a domestic wellness check related to his household. Years ago, maybe, but recent enough to make my stomach turn. I thought of my nephews, how they always said Dad says we don't cry, or Dad says champions never lose. How they twitched when the garage door slammed or fell silent when Grant raised his voice. I kept reading. There were notes on 2 past incidents involving DWI charges, both resolved with community service. 1 public intoxication citation, and a handful of domestic disturbance calls, no arrests but recorded. Arguments loud enough for the neighbors to call. Chaos buried under smiles and football trophies. All those years they called me unstable. All those years they said I needed help, needed to man up, needed to grow out of it. And yet here it was proof that the crown Grant wore was held up by secrets and silence. I stared at the screen, one thought looping. If I show them this, everything ends. Not just the illusion of Grant, the whole family. My mother's fragile image of perfection. My father's belief in discipline as virtue. My nephew's faith that their father was a hero. I had a weapon. But did I want to fire it? The deeper I went, the more a timeline emerged. Every financial dip in Grant's record synced up almost perfectly with his escalating behavior. The louder he bragged, the more in trouble he was. The week he offered me a job at the dealership was the same week he received a notice from the IRS. When he laughed about me being between gigs, he'd just bounced a loan payment. He didn't dig into me to hurt me. He did it to survive me. He needed me to fail, or failing that he needed me to bail him out, to become the financial raft for the image he was desperate to keep afloat. And now he knew I could. Sunday was approaching. This time I wouldn't be walking in blind. I set 3 rules for myself. First, observe everything. Every micro-expression, every shift in tone. I wanted to see their reaction to the report Grant had paid for. Second, offer nothing new, no additional details, no numbers, no reassurances. If they asked, I would smile. If they pushed, I would leave. Third, be ready to walk out. The second this became a shakedown. Then late Friday night, Grant texted, "Hey man, wondering if you can come by earlier Sunday. Nothing bad, just some family stuff to talk through. Would be good to have you there." Friendly. Too friendly. Like the warmth of a hunter inviting you closer. I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. Sure. See you then. I knew exactly what was waiting for me. He'd seen the report, and he was already building the stage. Driving back to Marigold Ridge felt like heading into court, not dinner. I kept the windows cracked and the music low as I crossed into Vermont, trying to keep my breathing steady, my mind from spinning. It was supposed to be a meal, not a confrontation, but my body knew better. My jaw was tight. My fingers curled around the wheel like I was bracing for an ambush. I rehearsed my boundaries like a lawyer prepping a closing statement, leave early, if needed, no arguing in front of the kids, and absolutely no talking numbers. When I pulled up to the driveway, the house looked the same, but the energy hit differently. My mother met me at the door with a smile too wide and a voice pitched just a little too high. "There he is," she said, like I was a prodigal son who might turn to ash if she blinked. Dad came in for a handshake that lasted a second too long. He looked me in the eye and asked how work had been lately, like he actually wanted to know. They knew. Or at least they thought they did. Inside, the smell of rosemary chicken and lit candles should have been comforting. But it felt staged, like the set of a play I hadn't auditioned for. I wasn't the black sheep anymore. I was something worse, an unknown variable. And then Grant made his entrance. He walked in like a man riding the wave of his own myth. Flashy watch-tailored blazer, the kind of cologne you could smell before you saw him. And then came the hug and arms slung around my shoulder like we were buddies. He said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "You all know my little brother's killing it in tech, right?" The room chuckled. But I heard the twist in his voice. He wasn't giving me praise, he was borrowing it. He was rewriting the script. If I was doing well, it was because of him, his patience, his example, his unspoken mentorship. I was the little brother who'd finally gotten it together. I could already see the lines forming in their heads. He always had potential. We always believed in him. It was just a matter of time. And just like that, they were rewriting history. At one point, my mother told Brielle's husband that I'd always been independent, just quiet about it. My father said he always knew I'd find my way back. I didn't correct them. I didn't interrupt. But I took note of every revision. Because if they could rewrite the past, that easily they could erase the pain that came with it. They could erase me. Over dinner, Grant kept steering the conversation toward family. He talked about Mom's health, Dad's dreams of retirement, how now that we're older, we should look out for each other. Then he turned to me. "Ever think about buying a place out here?" he asked casually. "Might be smart to invest close to home." He never said help. He didn't need to. Then Mom chimed in, soft as sugar. "You're still renting, right? Or did you buy something?" She asked if I had a new car, if the company gave equity. Each question laced in innocence but angled like a scalpel. I kept my answers vague, non-committal. That shift in energy, just a flicker, told me I'd failed their test. Grant didn't like the attention shifting away from him. He started flexing again. Big deals in the pipeline. Promotions coming soon. I nodded, sipped my water, didn't rise to it, which only made him press harder. He started reminiscing loudly about the old days when I was selling comics out of a strip mall. He grinned while saying it, but the intent wasn't nostalgia. It was a leash. A reminder that I'd once been dependent, that any success I had now was born from their tolerance. That was the real message you owe us. So I hit him with a single question. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look around. I just asked, "Why did you hire a PI to dig into me?" Grant's silence. Every fork stopped midair. Even the kids looked up. Grant blinked, then forced a chuckle. "Man, come on. I was just worried. You go dark sometimes." I looked at my parents. Neither met my eyes. That was enough. This dinner was never a celebration. It was a negotiation. And I was being sized up not for who I was, but for what I could give. After that question, the air in the room turned to glass. Conversations carried on in tone but not in substance. Nobody could look too hard at anyone else. The kids kept eating, not understanding why the grown-ups had gone suddenly quiet. I leaned back in my chair, silent, watching Grant pick at his food like he hadn't just been outed in front of everyone. He was waiting for the moment to reset the game. It came after dessert. Grant cleared his throat, clinked his glass, and said, "Hey, before everyone heads out, I just wanted to talk about something real quick." He spoke like it was no big deal, like he was being the responsible son. He mentioned how Dad's been thinking about retiring, how Mom's health wasn't what it used to be, how expenses would start stacking up. "I think it'd be good if we all just pitched in where we can," he said with a glance in my direction. "Nothing crazy, just fair." Dad nodded. Mom adjusted her napkin. Nobody said anything direct, but the implication was as loud as a shout, "You've got money. We need money. Do the math." And here was the thing no one asked. They assumed. There was no "could you?" No "would you?" Just "you should." Because I could. Because they believed that made it mine to give. That was the moment I felt something inside me tilt. Not anger, not yet. Just a deep, visceral clarity. They didn't see what it cost me to build what I had. They saw the result. And to them, that result was communal property. I dodged. I smiled. I said I'd need time to think. And just like that, the tone changed again. Dad mentioned how back in the day I'd been a handful, how I'd struggled and acted out. He said we could have turned our backs, but we didn't. And look where you are now. Mom added that families sacrifice, that names mean something, that we aren't like those people who abandon each other. Guilt. Weaponized, polished, and aimed with surgical precision. Then came the knockout punch. Mom said, "Like last year when your nephew was sick and we couldn't reach you." I froze. What I asked. "Grant said he left you messages," she replied. "We didn't want to make a big deal, but we needed help. There was no illness, no calls." I checked my phone records later just to be sure. They were lying, fabricating moral debt. And when I didn't fall into the trap, they escalated. Grant started getting louder. "Don't act like you haven't needed us before," he snapped. "Don't act like you didn't get where you are because we covered your screw-ups." His voice rose. The kids went quiet. My mother whispered his name, but it was too late. Grant was unraveling. Not because I'd said anything wrong, but because I hadn't said anything at all. Then it slipped. "Things are tight right now," he muttered. "So don't make this harder than it needs to be." And there it was. Not pride, not brotherhood. Need. It wasn't about unity. It was about debt. About plugging the leaks in Grant's sinking ship. And I was the lifeline he was trying to guilt into grabbing the rope. So I stood up. I looked around the table, met every pair of eyes. "I'm not discussing money at a dinner table with kids around," I said, voice even. "And I'm not answering questions about what I own or what I make." Grant opened his mouth, but I didn't let him finish. "I get it," I said. "You all just found out I'm not the failure you thought I was. That doesn't mean I owe you anything." I turned to leave. My father started to speak, but I cut him off with one sentence. "Last I heard, I was still working at that comic shop that closed in 2011. Then I walked out. No yelling. No slamming doors. Just truth and the silence it left behind. I drove through the night back to Providence, my hands shaking from adrenaline but my mind cold and clear. I didn't feel triumphant. It felt like I'd just escaped a sealed room with no air. The real blow wasn't Grant's insults. It was how my parents stayed silent, then tried to guilt me into silence. The next morning, the campaign began. Mom called non-stop, soft, desperate pleading, "I don't stay mad." Grant texted long messages that bounced between fake concern and veiled threats. Brielle tried to play peacemaker. I saw the pattern divide the roles: comforter, enforcer, negotiator. It wasn't an apology. It was strategy. Then came another alert and attempted access to a different financial account. This wasn't just surveillance, they were testing control. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a family feud. It was a security threat. I dug deeper and found a link. Grant had likely used a local contact or client access to pull private data. If true, that was an ethics violation. I didn't confront him. I documented everything: dates, alerts, logs. I shifted from emotional defense to legal offense. I also realized the next move would be social. Marigold Ridge gossip spreads like wildfire. They'd paint me as the wealthy, ungrateful son who abandoned his aging parents. Not to strangers, but to allies I might need one day. It wasn't my image I feared losing, it was autonomy. That's when I took 3 steps fast. 1. Froze all credit. Locked identity monitoring. Changed security protocols. 2. Met with a lawyer. Updated my willpower of attorney and beneficiary info. Removed all loopholes. 3. Scheduled one final meeting, public, no kids, and on my terms. Then I met Sloan Harper. It was at a cybersecurity panel in Boston I'd RSVP'd 2 months ago. Her talk wasn't about family, but it might as well have been. "Decide who gets access to your life," she said. Afterward, I told her a condensed version of my mess, not as a victim, but as someone trying to sort risk. She didn't offer comfort or revenge. She asked one question. What role do you want them to have in your life? That reframed everything. I wasn't showing up to beg or fight. I was showing up to shut the door myself. We met at a coffee shop in Burlington. Public. Neutral. I told them no kids, no extras. If they didn't like it, don't come. They came. Mom led with tears. Dad sat stiff, trying to sound in control. Grant joked like nothing happened. I didn't waste time. I laid out the facts. After our last dinner, someone attempted to access my financial records. I traced it to North Star Investigations. I knew who hired them. I looked Grant in the eye and asked, "Who gave you that right?" They didn't deny it. They danced around it. Mom said they didn't know I was doing so well. Dad muttered something about being proud. But I saw it. They weren't sorry. They were caught. Then Grant cracked. He talked in circles. "Family helps family, you've got more than enough just for now." I cut him off. "No more money talks," I said. "Not now. Not ever." He pushed again. So I gave him one line: "I know about your tax issues. I know more than you think." That was it. No threats, no theatrics, just clarity. I ended it with 4 conditions. 1. No one investigates or accesses my data ever. 2. Meetings only in public, short and on my schedule. 3. No guilt through the kids, no backdoor manipulation. 4. Mentioning money ends the meeting. I stood up, calm, certain. Mom cried. Dad said nothing. Grant looked furious. I walked out. Back home, I finalized every legal document, locked everything down. If they respected my terms, we could have occasional contact. If not, I had peace. I had Sloan. And I had my life, mine to protect, mine to decide. I used to think the worst thing a family could do was stop loving you. Turns out it's pretending to love you while quietly trying to control, rewrite, and erase you. This wasn't just about money. It was about power, about image, about who gets to decide your story and who gets to profit from it. For years, I blamed myself for the distance. I thought if I just worked harder, earned more, kept quiet longer, maybe they'd finally see me, respect me, care in a way that didn't come with strings. But love with conditions isn't love. It's leverage. And somewhere between Grant's fake smile and the second background check, I realized the truth: I was never meant to be part of the family's golden image unless I paid for my seat at the table. That night I walked away from the cafe. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a man who finally let go of the version of family he wished for. I made peace with the fact that some bonds aren't sacred. They're just habitual. And habits like chains can be broken. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's survival. Especially when those closest to you treat your privacy like a threat and your success like a resource to be mined. I chose peace, not silence. I chose clarity, not conflict. And most of all, I chose myself, not out of selfishness, but out of necessity. If you've ever been in that place where the people who should protect you make you feel like you're only valuable when you're useful, I want you to hear this: you're not alone. And you're not wrong for wanting more. You don't have to explain your success, your distance, your choices. You don't owe anyone your downfall just to make them feel comfortable. I know this story hit a nerve for some of you. Maybe it mirrored something in your own life. Maybe it opened a wound. Or maybe it gave you language for something you've always felt but couldn't name. If it did, I hope you'll stick around. These stories aren't just about me. They're about all of us trying to reclaim our own lives in the shadow of expectations we never agreed to. Walking away didn't feel like winning. It felt like finally putting down a weight I'd been carrying so long I forgot it had a name. And maybe that's the part worth holding on to. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is stop negotiating for love that only shows up when it benefits someone. We don't have to turn bitter to set a boundary. We don't have to burn everything down to protect what's tender. We just choose clarity, and we keep choosing it quietly, consistently, until our life starts to sound like our own again. If any part of this story stirred something in you, you're not strange for that. A lot of us know what it's like to be underestimated, to be managed, to be remembered as a version of ourselves that no longer exists. And still there's room for compassion. Not the kind that excuses harm, but the kind that lets us step out of the cycle without losing our humanity. If you'd like to stay close to stories like this, real messy humans, subscribe and be part of this little corner where we listen and we share. And if you want, leave a few lines in the comments where you're watching from or what this brought up for you. I read more than you might think. Thanks for spending this time with me. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next story.